What is up, Knicks fans? Welcome back to yet another episode of Fireside Knicks with your hosts, Dylan and Ryan. And today we're going to talk a little bit more about the head coaching search. As everybody pretty much knows by now, the Knicks fired Tom Thibodeau yesterday, so that era is officially done, and we're on to the next step, and we now need to find a new head coach. There's a bunch of different names that have been floated around in the past 24 hours, and we're just going to kind of dive in and talk about those guys. So Ryan, first off, tell me how you're doing, and secondly, we already talked about Tom Thibodeau getting fired, during our live stream yesterday. So now I want to hear about who you think the Knicks should target in this head coaching search.
Yeah, I'm doing great. We're not 24 hours removed, but we're close to 24 hours removed from the departure of Tom Thibodeau. And look, we talked about this at nauseum on the live stream yesterday. We believe it's the right move. I believe you and I are fully behind the decision to let go of Tom Thibodeau. But it's just as important to nail the next hire. You have to make sure you land the right guy to steer this ship. And so far, when I look at the candidates available, the guys that the Knicks have been linked to or the guys that the Knicks have had shut down for them, Ime Udoka has been iced out of it. Jason Kidd has been basically iced out of it by reports that they will not get permission granted to them to interview Kidd. And I'm kind of glad. I didn't really want Kidd. I did think Udoka would be a great fit, but I really don't want Jason Kidd to be the head coach of this team. No discredit to him, but you know what I mean? He's been around a little bit, and it's not always been great. He's done a really good job with Dallas, to his credit, but I'm good with I'm good with looking at other candidates. The guy who I think has propelled himself as the favorite is Johnny Bryant, because the Suns were one of the teams heavily interested in hiring Johnny Bryant. They did not choose to hire him. He remains a coach who is interested in being a head coach, and he is, in my opinion, a very brilliant basketball mind who understands the value of spacing, understands, what a modern offense needs to do to have success in the NBA. And I think Johnny Bryant, he has familiarity with some of these players. I think he'd be a perfect fit for the New York Knicks. He is a logical fit. And I'm not saying that if it's anyone other than Johnny Bryant, I'll be upset, but he's a logical fit. He's a guy that if you were to tell me today, hey, Ryan, take a guess as to who the next head coach would be, Johnny Bryant would be my guess. That's who I would pick. I don't know if that's where you're at, Dylan, yet, or, maybe you're still unsure as to what you would answer that as, but Johnny Bryant, good young basketball mind, brilliant basketball mind, forward-thinking basketball mind. I can 100% see him being the guy who steps in, overhauls this Knick offensive scheme, and takes them to that next level. I fully see it with him. Hopefully, he has interest in the Knicks as well, because he's a really good candidate.
Yeah, and, I want to talk about Johnny Bryant, too, because he, obviously has ties with the Knicks already. He was an associate head coach under Tom Thibodeau for a couple seasons, and then he was with the Cleveland Cavaliers coaching staff this past season. We saw how fantastic Cleveland was this year. Obviously Johnny Bryant wasn't the head coach of the Cavaliers, but he obviously played a role in why Cleveland was able to take such a big leap in the regular season this past year. I know they fizzled out in the playoffs, but they still won 64 games in the regular season, and you think if you give that Knicks team the same amount of talent, they can end up going further. But, with Johnny Bryant, I don't know too much about him, but I do know that he's a very good offensive-minded coach. I know he can really orchestrate some good offense, which I think the Knicks need. Obviously a lot of their problems this past season were defensively, but I blame Tom Thibodeau for that scheme-wise. I think, with a more modern coach, a guy who kind of understands both sides of the ball a little bit and can kind of really enhance the offense, then the Knicks can go a lot further, because I felt like, even on the nights where I thought the Knicks defended well, they were limited offensively. There were nights where even like the Pacers wouldn't shoot that good, or even like the Celtics or whatever it is, but the Knicks still had to struggle to find a way to win because they couldn't score. When you can't score the basketball, you're not going to win games. It's no coincidence that these high-powered offenses are the ones that get far. Look at the Pacers. They're not they're not a bad defensive team, but they're also not like, a 0-4 Pistons defense. They're a good defense, but they're not like this best defense in the NBA. Their offense, though, they fly, they run down the court, they play fast, they shoot the ball, and now look, they're in the NBA Finals, and they've knocked out, the Cleveland Cavaliers and the New York Knicks in that process. It took them a ways to get there. It wasn't like they had the world's easiest route to the finals or anything like that. So, looking ahead for like Johnny Bryant as a possible candidate, I'd be for it. He hasn't been a head coach at the NBA level, so of course there's that little concern about that. But at the same time, I think some people, I've seen this and I kind of agree with it. Coaching experience in a way can be a little overrated. in a way. I mean, like, I don't think it's like 100% overrated. I do think it matters to a degree, but it depends who you are. You know what I mean? If you're hiring just like a former player for the sake of it, that's one thing. But if you're hiring a guy who has coached at the NBA level, even if it's not as a head coach, a guy who has coached at the NBA level, I think you're still hiring a right guy in that case. I think it's not necessarily like, oh, they have to have coached, they have to be a head coach to, be considered coaching experience. Not necessarily. I think if you've coached at the NBA level in some capacity and for a certain amount of time, that's coaching experience to me. It is to me, and I think, with Johnny Bryant, he's been a well-known associate and a assistant coach, whatever you want to call him. He's been very well regarded in the league for a while now. I think he'd be a good fit. I will say it is a little strange that he's had all these head coaching interviews and is still yet to land a job. I don't know if that's just because it's Johnny Bryant making those decisions or because these teams that he's been going to have had their eyes on a different target all along and they just kind of are entertaining the possibility of bringing him in. But whatever it is, I do think the Knicks need to at least keep their tabs on him. I think they should definitely, try to see if they can get an interview with him, possibly, go even further if he does really well. But there's other candidates out there too, and we're going to get into that. I don't want to just make this episode strictly about Johnny Bryant because there are other candidates out there. There's even other candidates that we're probably not even thinking of that the Knicks have their eyes on. I've seen like Jay Wright get thrown around, even though I don't think he's coming out of retirement. I know that's like, kind of one of those rumored names because of the whole Villanova connection. I give that like a 0.1% chance that actually happens, where he gets hired as the head coach of the Knicks. Same thing with guys like Dan Hurley, because I've seen that name thrown around too. I don't think he gets hired by the Knicks. I don't think the Knicks are interested enough in Dan Hurley for that. Nor do I think they're interested enough in Jay Wright for that. I think they're kind of past the, let's get the extremely experienced guys. I think they want a fresher face, a young voice in the, to be leading this team, which I think would be the right decision. This team is not exactly like the oldest team in the league. They're not super young, but they're relatively young. Most of the guys are below the age of 30 or right about to be at the age of 30. So, you want a guy who can kind of resonate with the players a little more, who can be more modernized and not use old school schemes and stuff like that, and get these guys to where we want them to be, which is the NBA Finals. You know what I mean? So, looking ahead, Ryan, I want to ask you, other than Johnny Bryant, what other names are there out there that, you think the Knicks should really consider?
So I'm going to throw one out there that I think every Knick fan is going to agree with, and I think every fan base, almost every fan base would want as their head coach. Look, he's a CAA guy. He's on a team right now that doesn't look great for the immediate future in terms of contending. Wouldn't it be sick if Eric Spoelstra wanted to be in New York, became the next head coach of the New York Knicks? Would that not just, that would be, people draw the comparison of like, this is a baseball reference here, Buck Showalter and Tom Thibodeau. The New York Yankees fired Tom Thibodeau. They fire Buck Showalter after making the postseason and for the first time in years, decades actually, and hire Joe Torre. They go on this dynastic run. I think Eric Spoelstra is the Joe Torre hire. Now, Joe Torre wasn't a very well-regarded coach at the time. Eric Spoelstra is, so that's not a perfect comparison. But if you want to make that home run hire, that hire that just takes you to the next level, obviously it's not likely, but, it would be fun. It'd be fun. Now, in a more, kind of some more realistic names, I do think the college coach route isn't the most unlikely. Like, I don't think it's impossible. I wouldn't, completely rule out a college coach, but I do agree that I'm not sure Jay Wright is the guy. And I'm not sold on, a Rick Pitino. You know what I mean? I get it. These are guys that, their names, they're easy to recognize. That's why they're going to get linked to the Knicks, but I don't foresee that particularly happening. Dave Bliss is an assistant coach for the Thunder. He's someone who I would love because he's with the OKC Thunder, and I'm going to be honest with you, I will take anyone who's in that coaching tree. Furthermore, I'll also point out that, just like the Joe Torre hire, just like the hiring of Leon Rose, hell, just like their hiring of Tom Thibodeau, just because the media does not like the hire or conventional media does not like the hire does not mean that it's a bad hire, or does it affect how I feel about the hire? The Knicks are getting blowback for firing Tibbs. You know what I mean? We're getting blowback for firing Tibbs after getting blowback for how many minutes he plays his players, after getting blowback for hiring him in the first place. and they're getting blowback for firing him. So I just put it out there. It sounds like you're just going to get blowback with whatever route you take. But outside of Johnny Bryant, Dave Bliss is probably a guy where I'd go and say, hey, modern basketball mind, young guy, hasn't coached the NBA level as a head coach before. I would love to see him get a try. The one thing that does scare me with a new head coach is the leash that person's going to get. I hope that Leon Rose and the front office do not rush this hiring cycle. I would be completely fine with them taking their time with this because I want you to make sure you're hiring the right guy and then granting that guy a leash. If this team gets bounced in the second round next year, I don't want them to fire their head coach. I don't want to be in that position. You know what I mean? Look at the Cavs, for example. They hire Kenny Atkinson. People are going to say, well, it did nothing for them. It did not. I disagree. I disagree with that. They did a lot for them. They are a contender now because of Kenny Atkinson. Before, or not just because of Kenny Atkinson, but his scheme plays a huge role in it. Before this year, I viewed the Cavs as a team we would beat anytime we played them in the postseason. Just a pushover. A team that you play them, you beat them. That's how I view them. This year, now going forward for the next few years, I'm not saying that they're the Celtics or the Thunder, but yeah, I'd consider them an Indiana Pacers level threat to us, a good team that can compete. So, and it's not like they're firing Kenny Atkinson after 1 year. In fact, I think that this year will show them that they made the right hire. So I just hope the Knicks hire someone that they can trust long-term, that they can keep there and give him time. Even if that person doesn't have the best first year, even if that first year isn't a finals run or a championship, got to give it some time. But yeah, Dave Bliss is probably the guy I'm looking at the most and be like, hey, I like him.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up Spoelstra because me being in Florida, I have a lot of friends that are Miami Heat fans. So if I go on here and I'm vouching for Eric Spoelstra, they're gonna be like, "He not leaving. He'll never come to the Knicks." And you know what? I think they might be right in this. I don't think Eric Spoelstra is actually gonna leave and come to the Knicks. I just don't see that happening at all. It would be nice. I would be lying if I said I wouldn't be okay with that. But I also don't think he's 100% the guy either. I think that there's definitely other options out there that they can go with. Me personally, I think they need to go for a more younger face, a fresh voice, a guy who, I don't want to say that he hasn't coached at the NBA level because who knows? There could be a really young coach out there that they go get who has coached at the NBA level before. But, I'd be okay with bringing up an assistant or something like that, hasn't been a head coach at the NBA level, and then they become a head coach here for the Knicks because, I think really what they just need is something fresh. I think that's really what they need because, they just spent this past season playing a lot of old school ball, if you really think about it. A lot of one-on-ones on offense, the drop coverage on defense, leaving shooters open, playing very short rotations, not really expanding the bench for most of the year. They need something different. They need a different look, and I think a newer face would give them a different look. And as far as, the other guys you mentioned, at this point, there's not many names that I'm looking at and I'm like, no, absolutely not. There isn't, because at this point, and I'm not even saying that in a way to really discredit Tom Thibodeau. No, he was a great coach, but it was time for a change. So at this point, I'm just open for anything because I know that this Knicks team is capable of, making it far just based off the talent they have on the roster. You know what I mean? Obviously, the head coach plays a huge part in how those guys perform together, but, I think with something different, they will perform better together. I really do. And, ultimately, Johnny Bryant is still the guy I'm really looking at. That is the guy I've got my eyes locked on at the moment. I feel like out of all coaching candidates too, he is the most likely, and the only way that he won't be is if I see him get hired somewhere else, or if he says that, or if he turns down a Knicks interview or a Knicks offer, whatever it may be. Until then, I firmly believe he's the favorite. I firmly believe that at this point, I give it a 50% chance that he will be the head coach of the New York Knicks next season. And the reason I give it 50%. We don't know who they're going to hire. There's so many other candidates out there. There's other names we haven't even thrown out there. I've seen people throw out Mike Budenholzer, Frank Vogel as other names as well. Obviously they're out on Michael Malone, so that's gone. That ship has sailed. I didn't want Michael Malone anyway, so I'm glad that ship has sailed. Ime Udoka, that ship has sailed as well. The Rockets are not entertaining anything with that. There's and as you said earlier, Jason Kidd is out. I'm okay with those guys being out. I would have loved Ime Udoka. Don't get me wrong. I would have loved it, but it is what it is. I'm not losing sleep over not getting Ime Udoka. I had a feeling we weren't going to be able to get him anyway. It was worth a shot, and the Rockets said we're not getting rid of him. So, it is what it is. The Rockets have the full-on right to do that, especially after being the second seed in the West in his second year with the team. So, I understand it, fully get it 100%. I think really at the end of the day, I don't know how I feel with the college route. The going after a college guy. I don't think it's exactly the worst thing in the world, but I don't think that should be their first option. I don't think the first thing they should do is look at college coaches. I understand like guys like Jay Wright and stuff like that are Hall of Fame coaches, whatever. But I don't think they should go that route. I think they need to look more at the NBA level and look at these other teams and look at their coaching staffs and see who they could possibly get out of one of their staffs. Because I think personally, going after a guy who, I know I said earlier coaching experience is a little overrated, but I strictly firm that to head coaching experience. If you're a coach at the NBA level, I consider that as like, it's an ounce of coaching experience. I really do. So in a way, I want to get someone who has at least coached in some way at the NBA level, in some way, whether it was as a head coach or an assistant, associate, whatever it is. As I want someone who has coached NBA players before. It's really that simple for me. That's what I got to say about that. I kind of want to get your input on that.
Yeah. So again, I don't think head coaching experience is a must for me. It's not. I think we agree on that. It's not a must-have if I want this guy in my organization. But I do want them to have, as you mentioned, experience on NBA players. I do worry about hiring a college coach to be an NBA coach because we see this in the NFL a lot. You hire a college coach, they're working with grown-ass men who are not students, who they can't just bully and push around. And then, for lack of better terms, shit gets real. You're talking to 30-year-old Josh Hart. 30-year-old Josh Hart is not going to let you talk to him the same way that an 18-year-old freshman is. That's just fact. We see that a lot in pro sports. It is not a seamless transition. It is not. I'd rather get someone who has been at the NBA level and has been, as you mentioned, around NBA players. That's why Dan Hurley is this weird kind of like, I can't tell if he would be a great or just an outright terrible head coach. I can't tell. It's a wide range of possibilities for me because, again, he seems like a very intense guy. And I don't know. That can either be to his detriment or to his ability to thrive because he does actually model his offense after NBA offenses. And if you look at his offenses at the college level, dude, it's gorgeous basketball to watch. It really is. Like I am not trying to demean or undermine Dan Hurley, the head coach, as a strategist. I just question what the demeanor is going to be like because personality and people skills matter. Like this is the one thing some people also forget. Like an organization is going to hire a head coach that gels and jives with their players. Even if people don't want to hear that, like your players have to like your head coach. Not saying they have to be best buds with him, but they've got to be able to respect him. This is a player-driven league. If Jalen Brunson woke up, and I'm sure that people are going to say, well, Jalen Brunson, he was very public about loving Tibbs. Yeah, because he probably felt his PR training is elite. This guy probably, there was no chance he was going to say that he wanted his head coach gone.
And there's also no way he didn't have any input on the decision either.
Yeah. I can't believe I don't understand how people could even think that Jalen Brunson felt as if he really wanted Tibbs to stay. He was heartbroken. He was not heartbroken. He probably was still heartbroken. But if you mean to tell me that Jalen Brunson didn't also feel a certain type of way about Tibbs' schemes, some of the players kind of hinted at it, right? McBride threw a little shade. Mikal Bridges was kind of vocal about it. Josh Hart didn't feel as if he couldn't contest some of the things that Tibbs was doing. It was like, I'm not saying that the players hated him or that he was bad with the players, but player input does matter here. So that's why I do feel a little bit uncomfortable hiring a college coach.
Either,
exactly.
The players aren't stupid. They know what's happening. They are also NBA players. They know how the sport works. They have also been under a array of different coaches across their playing career, from high school to college to the NBA. They know how this stuff works. And when things are not working, and no matter how hard you try, at some point you have to look at the coach and question it. I'm not saying the players were like, oh, this is all Tibbs' fault. No, I'm sure those players held themselves accountable to what they did wrong too, because it was, ultimately them losing in the playoffs was a collection of everyone making mistakes. It wasn't strictly just Tom Thibodeau. While I do think Tom Thibodeau was a large part of it, I don't think it was strictly him. The players, didn't come up, when they needed to either. So there is that. But these players also know what's happened, like you said.
Exactly.
McBride made it very clear. He even said it straight up. He was like, it felt like some things got exposed. He knows that team was flawed. He knows that squad that he was just on this year was flawed. And he was hoping that it would find its way to get hot and get a rhythm and get to the finals. Didn't happen.
Yeah.
Mikal Bridges, same thing, questioning the minutes right before that Portland game. Ironically, right before he hit that buzzer beater, questioning the minutes, about whether or not the starters should be playing as many minutes and that the bench should get more run. Almost nobody ever goes out there publicly and questions Tibbs' minutes. It's like almost notorious that nobody ever does that. And Mikal Bridges did that, and people gave Bridges some flack for that because it's like, oh, he's the new guy. What is he saying? Things like that. But I think he had the right to say it. You know what I mean? I think at the end of the day, the players should have the right to kind of speak their mind about something like that, especially when it's impacting them, their own self. Because Bridges even said it himself. It's not fun on the body playing that many minutes.
And I'll also say this is a testament to Tom Thibodeau. He handled it well. You don't feel like the players felt comfortable being public about these things. And at the end of the day, I'm not going to sit here and again, we are for this decision. But I will give Tibbs the credit of handled it like a man, didn't handle it like a man-child. And you wonder if someone like a Dan Hurley, who would never, ever, 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 ever at UConn have to deal with that, how would he handle that? If Mikal Bridges went public and was like, hey, I don't like this, or how is Dan Hurley going to react? Is he going to like it? Right? And another thing, too, with the player-coach relationship, this is a business. If it wasn't Tibbs' fault, it's the player's fault. It's their ass or yours, right? If you're Karl Anthony Towns, I think he's faced, look, he's a flawed NBA player, but some of the criticism that has gone his way on social media is beyond, it's personal at that point. And if you are engaging in it and you are someone who is, laughing and ha-haing at, these jokes, questioning his masculinity and his figure or whatever, you're a loser. You want to, if people want to call him a losing basketball player. And
who we're talking about too. If you've been on Twitter this morning, you know exactly who we're talking about.
And if you want to be, well, he's the loser, not me. I hate to do like the carrying the bucket for a rich guy, but he makes $60 million and plays for the New York Knicks. You don't. So if he's losing, shit, man, we all suck. So when it gets personal, that's where it gets a little weird. But in the case of Karl Anthony Towns, if you're Karl Anthony Towns, I mean, what is your experience in the top? What are you going to tell Leon Rose and James Dolan when they ask you about your experience with Tom Thibodeau? You did not play well at Jalen Brunson. This is crazy. This is a crazy stat. 3 assists. Jalen Brunson had 3 assists to Cat in the conference finals.
I saw that, and I was stunned. I had to double take.
How is that possible? How is that possible?
3 assists to your 2 All-Stars, meaning your 2 All-Stars have no chemistry whatsoever.
Dylan, I might be clinically insane. Are these not 2 offense-first players?
They are, and you know what's even more startling about it? Is that each player individually played better when the other was off the floor. I think that's even more startling. Issue? Is
this a new issue as well in terms of the 2 highest usage rate players in the Knicks not playing well with each other? This is a consistent theme under Thibodeau. Again, I'm going to go all the way back to RJ and Randall. I know, again, these were more flawed players. You understood it back then because they were more flawed players. RJ was an inefficient, high-volume player. Randall was a slightly less inefficient, higher volume player. It also at times didn't always click with Randall and Brunson. And Randall and Brunson, it only really started clicking between those two during that 13-game stretch where you had Anunoby, you had Hartenstein, and you had DiVincenzo all playing together. Why is it that my team, like consistently, why is that Tom Thibodeau teams don't have their top 2 stars playing well with each other? That is a question that you do ask. And if you're Leon Rose, you're putting together all this talent, and you're not getting plays ran through to have them work with each other. One of the big advantages of having Jalen Brunson and Cat on the same court is that the pick and roll opportunities are, beyond fruitful.
Endless.
It's endless. Yeah, they're endless because you have 2 unbelievable multi-level scorers. Jalen Brunson is not a perimeter-only scorer. It's why he's an efficient scorer at high volume.
And neither is Cat.
Yes. Cat is a 3-level scorer. Brunson's a 3-level scorer. And if someone wants to tell me, well, you can't win with those 2, again, 2 years ago, a bad guard and center defensive duo won the NBA Finals and kicked everybody's ass on the way there. everyone. They smoked everybody. They beat the crap out of Miami. Smoked them off the court. Smoked them off the court. So if someone's going to tell me, oh, well, you can't win Jalen Brunson with Karl Anthony Towns, Jamal Murray couldn't defend me. Nikola Jokic has no verticality. None. He's not the worst defensive player in the world. And obviously, a bad defensive 7-footer is still better than a bad defensive 6'1" guy. But if you compare Kat and Jokic defensively, you give the slight edge to Jokic. I'll give the slight edge to Brunson defensively over Murray. I think Brunson is far more useful and a far higher effort player than Jamal Murray is defensively. And again, Michael Porter freaking Jr. was one other player on the court, and they still won the finals. We got Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby. I get they had Aaron Gordon, and Aaron Gordon is more. He's way more versatile because of his height, and he's a better defender pair alongside a bad defensive center than Anunoby and Mikal Bridges, because you can't expect those two guys to be deterring other people at the rim. But God damn it, this team did not play great in the regular season. Again, it's like a lot of people, oh, well, you got to the ECF. Look at what you did this year. The reason that the Knicks season wasn't a complete and utter failure is because they beat Boston. That's it. Beating Detroit wasn't the success. The regular season was mind-numbingly bad. They weren't awful, but they underperformed. There was one series where they didn't underperform, the Celtics series, and it took. Let's be honest. Let's be honest. We don't have to be fanboys about this. We don't have to defend ourselves from Celtics fans here. Dylan, we got lucky to beat them. We needed things to go our way to beat them. We had to come back down 20 twice. We needed Jalen Brunson to have, I'm sorry, one of the best series I've ever seen from a guard. Ever. He was remarkable. Unbelievably clutch. Mikal Bridges' best plays came in the highest leverage situations. You cannot, if you re-simulate that series, that's not going to happen each and every time. So, when we talk about process, the process needs to get better. That's why I'm such a big Johnny Bryant guy, because it's a seamless fit. It doesn't take, there's not, the questions I would have about bringing in the guy is how they can handle the players. I've got no concerns about Johnny Bryant. None. Zero. Their commitment to the team long term, Johnny Bryant has never been a head coach before. As long as the Knicks are competitive, he'll love being here. He was here. I have no concern about that too. Number two. And number three, you don't even have to, there's all those college coach concerns. And then number four, is this guy a forward-thinking guy? Dylan, I think everyone's seen this clip at this point. The clip of him talking about spacing, man.
Yeah, I did.
That is the guy I want. I trust that guy to take me to the finals. I do. I trust that guy. I don't trust. I did not trust Tibbs. I trust Johnny Bryant. He's not even the head coach.
It brings back to my my point of a younger, fresher face, because Johnny Bryant is a younger and fresher face. He's not the youngest guy imaginable, but he's not exactly like, how old Tom Thibodeau was or how old like Jay Wright is and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So, and plus too, as you said, I'm not concerned about how he'd get along with players at all. I mean, he was already here once. Some of these guys who are on the team right now are already familiar with him. They know how he operates. They know how he works. And it's no coincidence that when Johnny Bryant was here, the Knicks performed well offensively. I don't think that's a coincidence. You know what I mean? These types of things matter. And that's why I think he's at the top of the list, really. And I think he's at the top of my wish list right now. Because, I mean, right now I haven't seen any other candidate emerge where I'm like, ooh, yes, go get him. The only one I probably said that to was Ime Udoka before the Rockets shut that down. So, outside of that, I'm just like, you might as well see what he's got. I'm not over here vouching like to go hire him right now, because they still got to conduct the interview. They still need to see how he could be in a head coaching setting. Totally understand that. We don't know all that information. We don't have access to that info. But at the same time, I think he's someone you can trust because he has been coaching in this league now for a minute. It isn't like he's like, just became an assistant last year and then, jumps right into it. No, he's been around for a minute. He knows his stuff. He clearly, that the video you said, obviously one video doesn't tell the whole story, but it shows that he knows a thing or two about spacing and offensive creation, which I think matters a lot to this Knicks team. I felt like this year on offense, they just were not creative enough. I really didn't feel like they were creative enough considering the weapons that they had on the floor. You have Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns, as we just alluded to, 3 assists in the conference finals. Why? That's not okay. Those are your 2 best players. You need to be running pick and roll. You need to get them in the action on offense. Every play, every single play should have involved those 2 or at least one of those 2. There is no reason, too, that I should have seen a lot of minutes, really, with both of them off the floor. I shouldn't have been seeing that. I'm sorry. I understand the bench had been stepping up at times, but there's really no reason why in a playoff setting in must-win games, we should be seeing lengthy minutes with our two stars off the floor. That shouldn't happen. Whether they're in foul trouble or not, that should not happen. And if they're in foul trouble, you can blame the lack of discipline, of course, or the officiating, or whatever you want to blame. But still, when they're not in foul trouble and they're able to be on the floor, they should have been out there every time. At least one of them. Every time. I understand you can't play them both all 48, but you got to have them both out there. And
Did you also see this?
Go ahead.
Finish your point.
No, I was just going to say, when you have both those guys on the floor, you can be expansive offensively. Tom Thibodeau did not expand offensively. He kept the same creation tactic, the same one-on-one tactic.
Yeah.
He refused to go in the pick and pop and the pick and roll. He refused to really set up any plays for Towns. You should be setting up plays for Brunson and then setting up plays for Towns. I felt like he was over-relying on Brunson to set up every play. And you're not getting Mikal Bridges involved nearly enough either. He was mostly just corner sitting. That's a problem. I think with Johnny Bryant or even any other coach who has a little bit of offensive creation to them will make a huge difference. I understand defensively they stunk this year, but you can fix the defense by being active. But if you can become an elite offense, you become tiring to your opponent, and then you can play better defense that way. It's that simple. I wanted to hear what you wanted to say, though.
Oh, Josh Hart shared the court with Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns for 85% of their minutes. I mean, look, again, I don't mean to make this the Tom Thibodeau was not good at his job last year rant, but my God, was the guy not good at his job last year? And it kind of makes you excited that this team played this well despite that, despite everything, despite all of it. The depth wasn't utilized enough. Their team was not as deep as Indiana's by the time the postseason came around. All of it, everything. The New York Knicks
people have been blinded by the fact that we made the Eastern Conference Finals. But if anyone actually watched the Knicks all season, I mean, me and Ryan watched all 82. We watched every single game, most games, whatever. We saw how this team played night in and night out. And the problems that were flaring up in the playoffs were in the regular season too.
Yes.
It wasn't exclusive to
the
Eastern Conference
some
Finals.
Of the stuff they did in the postseason out of desperation. They didn't do it in the regular season. We didn't see Cat and Mitch start together, even in games that mostly didn't matter. That's really not good. Do you know how many times we saw?
We didn't see Deuce McBride with the starters really either.
Yeah, how many times during the season, regular and post, did you see Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby have to dribble and drive to try and create a shot in isolation instead of getting these guys moving around? The Knicks were not moving guys around a lot, and that matters. And the positive sign for this front office, if you're a New York Knicks fan and you're like, typical Knicks, this is what they do, James Dolan, oh my God, which first and foremost, Ian Begley confirmed it was Leon Rose's decision. James Dolan's going to go with whatever Leon Rose wanted to do. And that is what he has done throughout the entire tenure with Leon Rose. So if you're going to miss me with that typical Knicks, lol Knicks, yeah, you don't know sport. You just don't know sport. Oh, poor Tibbs. How could you fire him? He died to the Eastern Conference Finals. Again, same people, from the people who brought you, how could you hire Tom Thibodeau? How could you sign Julius Randle? Why would you sign Jalen Brunson to that contract? And this team's going nowhere. But from the same people who brought you that, here comes the New York Knicks scapegoated Tom Thibodeau. And
you can never win. You can never win.
The Knicks don't do things based on results anymore. They do it based on process, folks. And if you want to point to the best organizations in pro sports, they don't look at the results. They don't look at we lost in the NLDS. The Dodgers should rebuild. The Dodgers shouldn't try. No, they went out and got Shohei Ohtani, and they won the World Series. They're process-oriented. They don't, you know what I mean? They don't just look at the results. Look at the Oklahoma City Thunder. When they lost in the second round last year, which was a disappointing loss for them, they should have gone to the conference finals that year, in my opinion, or at least to the finals even. You could argue they should have been the finals representative for the Western Conference. Did they fire their head coach? Did they switch up the offense? No, they just brought in Alex Caruso, brought in Isaiah Hartenstein. They trusted what they had. They knew what they had. Jalen Williams had a terrible postseason. Terrible. It's awful. They trusted him. Chet was not great in that postseason. They trusted him. Now they're positioned to crush Indiana in the finals. Look at Boston. Boston, how many years? Break up Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Break it up. Tear it down. Get rid of them. How could you trade away Marcus Smart? That's the heart and soul of your team. They got a finals out of it. Finals, they never moved away from their process. The New York Knicks, doesn't matter if they went to the Eastern Conference Finals. Doesn't matter if they got there. They did not believe Tom Thibodeau was the guy for the job. And they're sticking to their guns. They're sticking to it. That is the sign of a good organization. If that organization is going to get criticism for acting that way, then if you're like that, you shouldn't talk basketball. That's how I view it. You shouldn't talk sports.
Yesterday revealed a lot of people who actually followed the Knicks throughout the year and who didn't. Yesterday you could tell who started watching the Knicks on Game 1 against Boston, and you could tell who started watching back in October against Boston. That's all I really can say about that. You can tell just who was paying attention and who was actually watching the games and who didn't. Those who just looked at the box score and said, "Oh, well, they won 51 games. They were the 3rd seed." Well, you made 2 blockbuster moves in the summer, and you were a 1-win improvement? You were a 1-win improvement. And you made those same 2 blockbuster moves in the summer, and you lost to the same exact team that beat you last year in the playoffs. Something's off, right? So, that should just tell you right there that a change needed to happen. I'm not even trying to discredit Indiana or discredit other teams or even knock down on players, but something had to change. There was no way that the Knicks could just do what they just did this year and expect to run it back next year fully, run it back with the exact same 15 guys on the roster and the same head coach and expect something different. It was not working. There were too many times this year where communication was not there, the players were not in sync, the players didn't have chemistry, the coach was not actively involved in the game. Too many times. There's obviously players and coaches can make mistakes. You can't do it too many times. And I was reading it up on this too. The Knicks wanted Tom Thibodeau to make the lineup change during Boston. They wanted it during that. And they were upset that he didn't do it during Boston, and they were more so upset that he waited until they were down 2-0 to finally do it, because they wanted to see Tom Thibodeau change his ways. This is what I'm trying to get to. He always coaches this way. This is nothing new. He's not coaching this specific rigid way specifically with the Knicks. No, he has been this way in Chicago, in Minnesota, and now in New York. Same things over and over. And the front office wanted to see him change his ways because they want to see their team win. And he waited till they were down 2-0 to make a lineup change. He went back to the same rigid rotation in Game 4 when they were down 1-2 and they end up dropping Game 4 on the road. By then, your season was over. And I feel like by then, they had their decision wrapped up. Considering how quickly they moved on from Thibodeau, they had this decision ready. They had said, if we don't get past Indiana, you're gone. They had it ready. That's really all I got to say about that.
And a lot of people who were in the know were like, oh, something major is going to happen the day before. So this was quick because they felt he was not good enough. I think they wanted the player input, and they wanted to do exit meetings to see if the players fully agreed. I think they wanted to know if the players fully agreed. They wanted to make sure the players felt the same way as to not, because again, this is a situation where, you don't want to catch your players by surprise. You want to understand how your players feel.
Either.
Yeah, and again, I did say this then, but before he got fired, and I'll reiterate this. If Jalen Brunson desperately wanted his head coach to remain his head coach, he should not have thrown up a stinker in Game 6. If you really wanted it that bad, play better. Play better. That is not saying he's a bad player or an unclutch player, but guys, if you told me guy's going to get fired, not saying he didn't try hard, of course. That's not what I'm suggesting. But you lost in Game 6 and you put up a stinker, right? Did it really? Doesn't strike me as the kind of performance that entails keeping your head coach. And one last thing I wanted to mention in regards to this coaching search is that I want to reiterate I have the utmost trust in Leon Rose to get the job done. I am not one to shy away from criticism of the New York Knicks. I think a lot of people are going to perceive us as the kind of people who they'll never criticize the Knicks. They're just Knick fanboys. I have slammed this team multiple times on this podcast, and I've said it on Twitter, and I will be critical when you need to be critical.
We talk about it how it is.
yes, there is nothing bad about what they did. Even if you think they won't find a better coach, you are crazy to say that the New York Knicks were going to win a title with Tibbs the way he was running his offense. Or you don't watch basketball. You don't watch basketball. You don't.
And two, sometimes you have to make a tough decision like that
Yes.
to get better. Sometimes you have to make the quote-unquote unpopular move to get better. You're never when it comes to the Knicks too, playing in New York in a high media market, intense media market, all this stuff. You're whatever moves you make, whether you make moves in free agency, trades, head coaching hires, firings, whatever, you are gonna have a lot of people publicly say that move sucked. You're gonna have a lot of people say that, and especially too because the Knicks were so bad during the 2010s and most of the 2000s as well. You're gonna still have people say that because they still want the Knicks to be their punching bag. They want them to be a laughing stock still. They want to see the Knicks fail. Look what happened when the Knicks lost to the Pacers. Everybody was happy. Everybody was like, "Let's go! The Knicks are gone." I'm so happy. You had Brandon Pajemski of the Warriors go on Up and Adams with Kay Adams yesterday, saying, "I'm glad that the Pacers beat the Knicks because the Knicks were gonna get swept in the finals by the Thunder." You have an NBA player saying that. You have an NBA player going on a podcast saying, "I'm so happy the Knicks are gone."
Yeah, I mean, I'm so happy that Brandon Podziemski. What is he? Sorry. I mean, this is a superstar right here. 11 points a game, 5 rebounds, 3.4 assists. This guy's a stud. Oh my God, a monster.
Go look at his playoff numbers
Below
too.
average efficiency.
Go look at his playoff numbers too.
Oh, these playoff. Dude, he's a stud. He's a stud. I think maybe if Brandon Podziemski went on fewer podcasts and maybe took some more three-pointers, maybe took some more shots in the gym, we wouldn't shoot 36.4% from the field. Hey, Pods, when you lost Steph Curry for a little bit, your team could have really used you, bud. Shot 36.4%. Jesus, he shot April 11th. He was shooting April 11th, averaging April 11th. Nice, man. Way to help your team get there. What a job. Let's give a round of applause. I can't do it because I have to hold this mic, but round of applause for Brandon Podziemski. Wow. Wow. I mean, just a remarkable playoff performance. You can't hate on this. Can't hate on it. More podcast quotes talking about the New York Knicks than he does good playoff runs. That's phenomenal. Good job, kid. Way to be, young man. See, again, it's people who and I get it. He plays basketball, and people are gonna say he plays. You don't. He knows basketball. People don't know basketball talking about basketball. It's a crime that sports have gotten to a point where the conversations are the biggest, the most listened to conversations are the ones between people who don't know the game. It's a shame. You have Mad Dog Russo going on about Leon Hess. This is what he said. Leon Hess, not Leon Rose, Leon Hess, was a moron for letting Isaiah Hartenstein go. Of course, we all know the New York Knicks could have just offered more money. That's obviously what could happen. They just chose they didn't like Isaiah Hartenstein. Great point. Leon Hess sounds like a terrible GM, man. I don't know who this Leon Hess guy is. Sounds awful at his job, though. Didn't want to offer more money for Isaiah Hartenstein. There's definitely not a CBA rule that prevented them from doing that. No, there's no CBA rule. No, none of that. I can't lie. I really can't stand the discourse, though, because, again, it's the same people who were like, yes, I'm an expert on the New York Knicks. I also thought Jalen Brunson was a bad signing. I also thought Tibbs should have never been hired. I also thought Julius Randle was a terrible signing. I also thought that this team was dead in the waters the second KD and Kyrie went to the Nets. I also thought this team was never going to be anything of value or no. I thought all of those things, but I'm an expert on the Knicks, and I know Tibbs shouldn't be fired. Sure. Great. Awesome. It's like the conversations where it's like, Becky Hammon's right. Look, Jalen Brunson only averaged 30 points a game on elite efficiency in the postseason. You can't win with that. What? You can't win with that.
Tell me why I saw odds yesterday that I saw some odds
yesterday. He's a chump. Go average 35.
I saw some odds yesterday that had Stephen A. Smith listed as a possible head coaching candidate. If I see Stephen A. Smith on my sideline, I'm not watching my team. I'm sorry. I'm not watching my team if I see him on my sidelines.
I would love to see Stephen A. Smith. I would love to see Stephen A. Smith coach a team just because, like, I would love to know how quickly he gets fired. Like, he would get fired in like, maybe a day. Yeah, maybe 2-3 days. He'd get fired in 2-3 days. There'd be players who demand trades the second he gets hired.
It's
What
crazy, but it's
Yeah.
crazy. The landscape around this team is nuts. But I see we're approaching 45 minutes on this,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I think we're in a good spot where we can wrap it up for now, and we'll be able to cover more of the head coaching searches as time goes along. But before we do close that, Ryan, do you have any other closing thoughts on Tibbs firing and the head coaching search and anything else that may come about?
No, it's just, look, I think that the New York Knicks made the right decision. I'm going to stand by that, and I think Johnny Bryant is, number one, the most likely coach for the New York Knicks at this point in time, as things stand right now based on the information we have, which is very limited, and it's too early to declare. If you're talking about favorites, it's almost hogwash at this point. And I think that the favorite being a guy that I would like to see on the New York Knicks is a good sign, hopefully. So, yeah, I'm pro Johnny Bryant. That doesn't mean I'm against everyone else. But, yeah, that's where I stand right now.
That's pretty much where I stand as well. And, ultimately, within the next week or so, we'll see where the Knicks go. I imagine that they'll have a new head coach in place before the NBA draft later this month. So, whenever that time comes, we'll be right here to cover that. But until then, we can always speculate on who they might hire, and we can say who we want them to hire. But at the end of the day, we're not in control of the decisions they make. We just come on here to speak about it. So that's really all I got to say. I think this is a good spot to finally wrap the episode up. We really hope you guys did enjoy this. I know our episodes have been a lot longer lately, but there's been a lot of big storylines with this Knicks team, and we really need to dive in and talk about it in depthly. So that's why they've been like this. I really hope you guys enjoy this though. You can follow us on all of our social media platforms as well. We're on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Of course, this YouTube page that you just watched the video on. You can listen to the audio version of this podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Make sure to give a 5-star rating on those. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can follow me and Ryan's personal Twitter accounts that are above our heads on the screen. And we'll see you guys in the next episode of Fireside Knicks. Peace out, and let's go Knicks.